Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pager here, once again with another video on The Flash Season 4, and this is going to be my review for episode 17 of this season, otherwise entitled Null and Annoyed. But of course, before we get into the rest of the video, if you've not watched the episode, go watch it before you watch this video, because spoilers are going to be in this episode review, so yeah, go watch it. But if you have watched it and you are continuing on with this video, if you have watched the episode and are continuing on with my review, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below your favourite part of the episode, what caught your interest the most, what didn't you like so much. Just leave all of your opinions in the comment section down below. And of course, if you're going to enjoy the video, be sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. So as most of us should know, The Flash has actually been on break for just over a month, I think, or around a month or something. It's been so long. So we are back. And I completely forgot what the last episode was, and I actually had to stop my video just then and go look. The last episode was the Run Iris Run episode. I swear there was an episode in between the Run Iris Run episode and this episode. It's been that long since we've had The Flash, which is just super strange. But anyway, last episode was obviously the Run Iris Run episode with Melting Pot involved. And yeah, that's when we found out that there were two more bus metas. One was called Janet Petty, the other one being Edwin Gauss, and we deal with Janet Petty in this episode, otherwise known as Null. Now we start off the episode with that cool hologram test room. It's almost reminding me of X-Men and what they do, but essentially we see DeVoe, the new form of DeVoe in the form of Izzy, as a hologram taking on Barry and Ralph. And essentially the plan was for Ralph to turn into Barry, have two flashes there, DeVoe gets a bit confused, and that's a way to take him down. But Ralph goes, well, I can elongate, so I'm going to make myself a turtle and put my head inside my body, because technically if my head's inside my body, then the Thinker can't use his little claws or whatever to get my head and, take me over. So that's Ralph's plan, but it's going against Barry's plan, which he's not, the most favourable of. Barry's getting quite annoyed at Ralph. One thing that carries on throughout the whole episode essentially is a back sort of story going on in the episode, is Harry and the thinking cap. So it's basically right at the beginning of the episode and it goes on until right at the end, which we will get into later in the video. But Harry's getting super frustrated with this. We know Harry's a guy that's always on edge, so if something's not working straight away, he does get really frustrated really easily. So with something like the thinking cap, where he's taking on someone with such high intelligence in the form of DeVoe or the Thinker, he's going to get frustrated a lot if nothing's working. So that's essentially what's happening with Harry throughout this episode, and we don't get too much of it. We just get little seeds planted in stuff that I think is going to play out mainly next week and the week after. But one of the subplots, so there's the main story is obviously with the bus metahuman, but the other story throughout this episode is between Breacher and Cisco. So essentially, Breacher just randomly turns up and he actually needs help with needs help from Cisco, might I say, because Breacher's powers have just stopped working. Or they haven't stopped working completely. They're just cutting out at certain points when Breacher would, really need them. Another one of the stories going on throughout this episode is actually the mechanic getting suspicious of DeVoe. Now I'm going to go through this whole thing right now, what happens throughout the episode in regards to that. The mechanic is getting really suspicious of DeVoe and what he's doing. The main one was when she goes, oh, there's 3 bus metas left, because she was counting Null, Folded Man, who was Edwin Gauss, as well as the Weeper, but DeVoe only mentioned 2. He only mentioned 2 because he actually has the Weeper in his own secret area where the mechanic doesn't know that he's there. The mechanic thought the Weeper had, escaped, was still alive, but DeVoe secretly got the Weeper. So she gets a bit suspicious there, what's going on there? Then she actually finds out that she is getting drugged by DeVoe, which is just next level. I thought something was going to happen there. But then it turns out that what the mechanic is doing is living on a loop. She's living the same day over and over. DeVoe's doing that by controlling and warping her mind and warping her memories with the abilities of Brainstorm, otherwise known as Dominic Lance, who we had early on in the season. He's messing with her mind along with the Weeper tears just to make her relive the same day over and over and over. And I'm guessing it's just so she gets to work and she's focused on the work and, what's the best way to put it? Just improves her work on a daily basis, if that makes sense. So it's going to be interesting in whether mechanic eventually breaks out of that. You'd think she eventually would, but I'm just wondering when that's going to happen. But I'm excited to see what goes down there, because that was a bit of a twist. I think the whole reliving the same day over and over and over in regards to the DeVoe doing it. I just thought she was forgetting that specific moment about recording that message and stuff like that. So I'm interested to see where that goes in future episodes. One of my favourite parts of the episode, and it was something that we knew was coming, was the Jay and Silent Bob cameo. Now, they weren't Jay and Silent Bob like those characters. It's not a crossover confirmed, But, Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes played Jay and Silent Bob, and essentially they played those exact same characters in this episode. They were actually labelled as Jay the security guard and Bob the security guard. So obviously Silent Bob is Kevin Smith, Jay is Jason Mewes. So I thought it was a nice little cameo and a nice little scene between those two. But in that museum scene and stuff like that, it was actually a Kahndaq reference. Now, Kahndaq is, like, the crown was from Kahndaq, I think it was, the thing that Null stole. That's actually the country that Black Adam rules over. It's in, like, the Middle East. I think it's, like, around near Egypt. It's, like, near Egypt, obviously. So that's, like, the fictional DC, the fictional, like, DC Comics country or nation that Black Adam rules over. So I thought that was a cool little reference. There was even another reference where, like, when Ralph, Barry, and Iris were walking down in Star Labs and stuff, and Ralph was like, "Oh, we should start our own, like, improv group and move to Washington DC, and we can be called the DC Comics." Get it? DC Comics. Nice one, Ralph. But we do find out that Breacher is actually losing his powers, not due to any sort of weird illness or anything like that, or something just strange going on. It's actually just old age and lack of energy. It's just that simple. That Breacher is just not able to use as much energy as he once could back in his, younger days, because, he just is getting old. He just doesn't have enough energy. So between him and Cisco, I thought they had a nice episode between the two, and you'd have to think this is the closing chapter for Breacher, but he could show up later at some point, but just without powers, I guess. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Now, we knew going into this episode through the trailer and stuff like that Barry was going to get affected by Null. It was interesting that, like, Ralph's old friend, is it Earl Cox? I know its last name's Cox. I think it's Earl Cox or Eddie. I think it's Earl Cox. He was actually, like, partnered with Null, I guess, for a certain mission. But, yeah, we see Ralph disguise himself as Joe West, which once again was against Barry's plan. Just frustrated Barry a bit more that had already been done by Ralph earlier on in the episode. But that was an interesting scene, but yeah, we see Barry get affected by Null, and if Null's powers in the comics is that she can, like, centralize gravity, like, or gravity change. In the show, it seems like it was just like, yeah, like, you touch something and you touch someone, they're affected by gravity, but there is a moment in, like, the final fight where she touches the ground and, like, the whole area starts to, like, build up and stuff, which is more like the comic version of Null. But yeah. Now, I was wondering why Ralph was being, like, a bit over the top with his comedy and stuff like that. There was a reason which we will talk about, which it more explains throughout the whole season. But in regards to this specific episode and the whole, like, over the top thing with, like, cracking jokes all the time and just trying to be too comedic, I think it was once again something that Arrow did last week where it felt really forced. It felt like they were just forcing it in, so there was a conflict between Barry and Ralph. I guess they had to have this happen, but it could have been done in a better way. It just did feel like it was forced, but the whole reason it was happening, like why Ralph was cracking so many jokes left, right, and center, and everything was happening with all the jokes and the comedy, was to build it to that point where Barry just got really frustrated with Ralph and just wanted to bench him and go out on his own. So that was the whole point of it. But once again, it just felt a bit forced, and I don't really like it when shows do that. Now, I did mention, like, in my trailer breakdown, I'm sure, for this episode, but on other videos in the past, where there was going to be a vampire in this episode. We had Crucifer the vampire, who is actually from the comics, and he is part of the 10th Circle with heaps of different cult members and stuff, like Breacher says early in the episode. I wasn't too sure if we were going to see him, because I knew they sent out a casting call for the character, but as it went on further, I was like, oh, are we going to see him or not? And I was a bit disappointed, but then we finally saw it. Breacher going out on his own, trying to take on Crucifer, who looked pretty cool, I guess. Looked like a vampire with all these bats and stuff flying around. And then obviously Cisco had to go in and save him. But yeah, that was a cool moment, I guess. Really quick. I knew it was going to be quick going by the casting call, because the role had no speaking for what it said, at least. But yeah, it was a cool scene, I guess. We got some vampires on the Flash, at least. So you can tick that off the Flash bucket list, if you want to call it. But essentially, the big build-up in this episode, I guess, was the whole conversation between Ralph and Barry, which we sort of had in the trailer for this episode, where essentially Ralph reveals his past, what happened through his childhood, and why he's always using comedy as a tool. And essentially, he uses comedy to mask his fear. So if he's scared, or he's, fearful, he either runs away and hides, or he uses comedy to mask that fear. And that's why as we're getting closer and closer as we move up to this finale, Ralph's, cracking more jokes and stuff. It's because he's getting more and more scared, about what's potentially about to happen with him and DeVoe. Like, DeVoe is obviously out there to get him because he is a bust metahuman. So Ralph's just getting more and more fearful of that situation. So it's perfectly explained why Ralph is doing that. I had suspicions of that. Like, you can go watch a video. I think it's like my episode 13 review. I did say something like that. Like, it seems like he's masking fear with the comedy. But hopefully, from now on, after what happens at the end of this episode, that isn't a thing. Like, Ralph still, like, in general conversation will crack a joke, but when he's in the fight and stuff like that, he doesn't do that. Or at least it's a bit more subtle. It's not like in your face and all of that. So hopefully it changes for a bit, because I know people are frustrated by it. I've liked Ralph's arc throughout this season. I think it's a really good character arc. Like, he started off as like basically this scumbag who was basically, Barry sort of screwed him over. Even though Ralph was doing something bad, Barry did sort of screw him over in the past, which led Ralph down a path where, he had a shitty life, to be completely honest, and he turned into a pretty shitty person due to that shitty life. But if there's positive things in Ralph's life, it's proven that he can be a positive character and a good character, and that's what's happened. He's changed as a character. I have a feeling people don't understand that, and people don't, realize that, but I've liked his arc, and I can't wait to see how it ends. Hopefully it ends on a positive note and him not getting killed by DeVoe, but we'll have to wait and see, I guess. But speaking of Ralph, as I did reference before, that final fight, he took charge, he saved Barry. Obviously, there was a bit of a comedic moment where they had the whoopee cushion earlier on the episode where Harry sat on it, and then Ralph turned himself into basically to a big whoopee cushion. But, it did save Barry's life, because Barry was a flash pancake if Ralph didn't do anything there. So, Ralph saved the day, but in a bit of a comedic way, but I think it's just a bit of a nod to everything that happened throughout the episode. But one of the big things that could lead into maybe the last episode this season is the fact that Cisco was offered the role of the new Breacher by, or Josh if you want to call him, but Danny Trejo's character of Breacher. The thing, I'm not too sure of what's going on here. Does this mean that if Cisco does take the role, is he off the show? Or if he took the role, it just means that that's his job now. He is a bounty hunter, but he still resides on Earth 1, or would he have to move to Earth 19? That wasn't made clear. That they did say about spending more time with his daughter and stuff like that. So I have to wait and see where that goes. I hope that Cisco doesn't leave the show, because if he leaves the show, there's a massive hole that's left, because he is, as Breacher says early on in the episode, he's like the smart guy. So if he leaves, I don't really know what the show could do. It's a big hole that the show would have to fill. And Harry's going down a bit of a dark path, which we'll talk about in a second. So hopefully Cisco doesn't leave, and maybe he just has to politely decline the offer. But we'll have to wait and see. You'd think that thing might happen in the last 2 episodes. Then we'll see Cisco leave in the finale if he's going to leave. And really, the big cliffhanger and the big finale, or final thing to happen in this episode, was Harry going into the time vault and basically pretending to be Wolzabard, or the Harrison Wells that was actually Eobard Thawne. He puts the thinking cap where the reverse flash suit used to be. He, uses the little key thing to get in. What is Harry doing? I'm really interested to see where that's going. It's obvious that he's going to use Gideon to improve the thinking cap, but it might send Harry down a darker path. And also, that reverse flash thing? Isn't that where reverse flash used to charge up his suit with energy and dark matter and speed force energy and stuff? Is he going to use that in the thinking cap to improve its power? Harry, mate, you're heading down a dark path, so I have to wait and see what happens there. But I wasn't expecting that, to be completely honest. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there in the next couple of episodes, I guess. But overall, I thought this was a good episode to come back on, because obviously the Run Iris Run episode, I had my issues with it, out of bias and stuff like that. I think it was one of the most controversial episodes of the season. So I think it came back this episode with a solid episode. I understand if people were maybe frustrated with the opening 15, 20 minutes of the episode, but I think once you hear Ralph's backstory and what had happened and why he does it, I don't think you really have too much room to complain. Fair enough if you don't like the character, but it's explained why he was doing certain things. So personally, as I said, I've liked the character, I've liked his arc, so I'm interested to see how it ends, hopefully on a positive note. But I can understand why people don't like him at the same time. But hopefully people understood why certain things were happening. Null had cool powers, I guess. We'll have to see what happens with her in the episodes to come. Because it was labelled that she's a recurring character, I think, for the season. So she's going to appear in a couple more episodes. So maybe Team Flash managed to talk her into yo, you're in grave danger. Better off just teaming up with us until we can sort all this out. So maybe she does that. But also next episode we have Folded Man, who basically disappeared off the face of the earth after the bus metahuman incident. So lots to look forward to next episode, and I thought this was a solid return episode as well. But thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on the video to show your support for the video and the channel itself. Obviously, let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on this episode. What did you like? What didn't you like too much? Just leave all of your thoughts and opinions down there in the comments. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I'll catch you later, guys. Goodbye.